Good morning and welcome to Gender. This morning rather, we're going to be talking about gender equity and the ways in which it affects the lives of women, girls, and transgender women across the world. My name is Gale Britton. I run a diversity and inclusion consulting practice out of Montclair, New Jersey, and I am very pleased to be here with you. For the past 3 years, I have been running this consulting practice, but prior to that, I had an extensive background in corporate America where my field of practice the last 10 years have been diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I am really happy to be with all of you today. We are going to get started. That's what I used to look like. I like to think I still look a little bit like that, although my hair is different, as you can see. The session objectives will be to identify and explore the meaning of gender, gender roles, gender norms, and consider the impact gender roles have on women, girls, and transgender women. But before we do that, we're going to have a bit of an icebreaker. I always like to include an icebreaker in my sessions because it gives people an opportunity to think about something a little bit differently than we are right now. So for our icebreaker, I'm going to ask that you type in the chat the lyrics to a song that is immediately recognizable by those lyrics. And once you type them in there, my trusty assistants, Nicole and Juliana, are going to take us off mute. And we're going to ask people to go a little bit crazy and just shout out. So I'm going to ask Nicole to read the lyrics, and I'm going to ask people to shout out the name of the song. So if I were to type in the chat, it might seem crazy what I'm about to say. Sunshine, she's here, then she goes away. I would hope that someone would recognize those lyrics to the song Happy. Okay, are we ready? Nicole, Juliana, can we go?
So the first chat is Imagine All the People.
John Lennon.
Yep, John Lennon.
Very good.
Someone also said, I Have a Dream.
Is that the Susan Boyle from Les Mis?
Oh, that's just ABBA.
Oh, I was thinking of I Dreamed a Dream from Les Mis.
Okay.
Yeah, that's another one. I'll put that
I
one.
I have a dream, a song to sing.
Ah, okay. Any more?
Oh, right now being election time, I guess.
Someone mentioned I Dreamed a Dream, which is from Les Mis, and someone else also mentioned My Country, 'Tis of Thee.
Ah, okay. So this isn't a very musical group. The last time I did this, I had people shouting out lyrics, and you could see the differences in generations. So we had a lot of 90s hip hop references, and we had a lot of Motown references. So it was really interesting to see that happen. So we're going to move forward. I'm not going to torture you with my icebreaker any longer. And we're going to start off with exploring definitions. So gender refers to the characteristics of women, men, girls, and boys that are socially constructed. These norms, behaviors, and roles associated with being a woman, a girl, a man, or a boy, as well as how those relationships work with one another, are social constructs. And they vary from society to society, and they can change over time. It's interesting the importance that gender and the identifiers, particularly here in this country, where it's become like very commonplace and in vogue to have gender reveal parties. And I was talking about a gender reveal, I guess the one in California that started one of the wildfires. And my daughter said to me, it's interesting, people go through all the trouble to reveal the gender as if the gender is going to remain static. And that's the other thing about gender, it can change, it's fluid. Sex is either of the two categories based upon humans and other creatures that are categorized based upon their reproductive functions. Cisgender, relating to a person whose personal identity corresponds to their birth sex. I consider myself cisgender. Transgender, which denotes a person whose identity does not correspond to their birth sex. Genderqueer is a person who does not subscribe to conventional gender distinctions, but identifies with neither, both, or a combination of male and female genders. Gender fluid, denoting or relating to a person who does not identify themselves as having a fixed gender. Non-binary, relating to a gender or a sexual identity that is not defined in terms of traditional binary oppositions, such as male, female, homosexual, or heterosexual. And then sexual orientation, a person's identity in relation to gender or genders to which they are sexually attracted. The fact of being a heterosexual or homosexual. And then pansexual is not limited in sexual choice with regard to biological sex, gender, or gender identity. So what's the point? Labels have for centuries, regardless of culture, defined or have attempted to define the roles of women, girls, and transgender women, and men as well. But we're going to focus on women, girls, and transgender women. But I want to take a moment to talk about how men too are defined by these the norms that society puts upon them, and I think those labels tend to put all of us in a box where we are expected to remain. Today, we're looking, as I said, we're looking at girls and transgender women and how these labels obstruct and hinder their progress towards equity. So the Gender Equity Index looks at the intersections of inequalities and their impact on women and girls. If you think about it, one of the things about it, when I think about my own gender, being an African American woman and the things that I faced in my life, those two things intersect. And oftentimes I could be the victim of sexual harassment as a woman. I could be the victim of racial discrimination. And these intersections oftentimes are so intersected that we don't even see them. These intersections are talking about structures. So when we look at power and how power is political, it's economic, and it's social. Knowledge, whether or not you can attain it or whether or not it's segregated. Work, whether or not, how you're able to participate in work, the segregation of work, the quality of work, the pay of work. Violence, the prevalence, the severity, and whether or not it's disclosed. health, your status, how your health is regarded, whether or not people think you being healthy matters, your health behavior and your access to health, and time. How much time is spent by women and girls in care activities and social activities. Just recently, I think it was 2 weeks ago, that McKinsey came out with a study that revealed how many women were leaving the workforce because of children at home. They don't have time to care for their children that have been home, that they've been homeschooling or supervising at home since the pandemic. And just hundreds and hundreds of women are having to leave the workforce. Especially, it's more prominent in women with younger children. And then money, the financial resources, the economic situation that you might find yourself in, and how all of these things intersects and really define how much equity you're able to access within your particular society. I'm going to talk about 3 of these. I'm going to talk about health, I'm going to talk about education, and I'm going to focus on violence. So gender discrimination in education, gender discrimination in education leads to poverty. Poverty leads to healthcare disparities. It's incredibly common to see women who have little or no education experience globally. And this leads to child marriages. Child marriages lead to early births. Also associated with child marriages are sexually transmitted diseases and an increase in infant mortality. Educated women and girls experience different health care abilities to access health care and a different level of knowledge. A child born to a woman who can read is 50% more likely to live past the age of 5. And they are less likely to experience child marriages. There are 774 million illiterate adults in the world. 2/3 of them are women. That's roughly about 515 women that are illiterate. And despite the many initiatives across the globe, this data point has not changed in 20 years. Girls are more likely than boys to never enroll in school. The lack of education, once again, impacts health, childbirth, child marriages, infant mortality, and poverty. Violence. Violence against women and girls. In the US, 20 people per minute are the victims of domestic violence. In 1 year, that's over 10 million women and men. Now, women are disproportionately affected by this, but men are also the victims of domestic violence. Globally, the vast majority of intimate partner family-related homicide victims are female. The largest number of women killed by intimate partner or family member. So in Asia, it's 20,000. In Africa, it's 19,000. In the Americas, it's 8,000. Europe, it's 3,000. And Oceania, it's 300. So you start to see, as I'm sure you're starting to think about, that this is closely related to the size of the population. So just looking at the numbers of incidences don't tell the full story. The rate of intimate partner-related homicide was greatest in Africa, where it's 1.7 per 100,000, followed by the Americas, 1.2 per 100,000. The least amount of risk was in Oceania, 0.9, Europe, 0.6, and Asia, 0.5. These statistics relate to homicide. So what we're seeing is that women who are the victims of partner violence pay by the loss of their life. In some parts of the world, intimate partner violence isn't against the law. There are 20 countries in the world where it's not against the law. The majority of them are on the continent of Africa. And there are about 30 sub-Saharan countries where domestic partner violence is acceptable.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, Judy.
Question? So I'm going to finish this slide and then I'm going to pause for some questions for a moment. In the United States in 2014, there were 1,875 victims, mostly women, killed by an intimate partner. In 2019, that number rose to over 2,200. Men are more frequently the victims of homicide, but not at the hands of an intimate partner. Transgender women are not captured in all the data worldwide or even nationally. Transgender women experience educational, healthcare, and workplace discrimination on a consistent basis. And one of the reasons why the data isn't captured is because they lack the status for it to be captured, which is sad. Transgender women in violence, the number of transgender or gender nonconforming murders in 2020 have surpassed the total in 2019. There were 33 deaths in the United States in 2020. The sad part, or what I find incredibly sad, is that many of these deaths go unreported. So we have no idea whether how large the number really is, because 33 is what's been reported. And not only do they go unreported, but those that are reported don't get a lot of attention from law enforcement. It's almost like, they throw up their hands. And this is quite candidly, in my view, a terrible form of discrimination. So I'm going to stop and see if we have questions that people would like to put in our chat.
Can I just ask a clarification question, Gale? I'm Gerard Faraz. The numbers for the Americas, is that broken down into North and South America, or even by country?
I don't have it like that, but I could probably get it for you if you send me your information.
No, I'm just curious.
No,
yeah.
it's just all lumped together.
Okay.
Based upon what I would think, it's hard to say how it would break up. Yeah, it's really hard to say how that number might break up when I stop and think about South America and Central America and even the United States.
Yeah, it would be interesting, I think.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see what that looks like, and to see if there is to look at, based upon the populations, whether or not there's any difference.
Right.
I noticed you have a couple of chat questions here.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, I was just going to read them. One of the questions is, I noticed you didn't list bisexual in your definitions. Is there a reason?
No, there wasn't a reason.
The next question is, how can we bring this into the classroom on sustainability?
So I don't think that we can sustain anything without bringing everyone into the conversation. So if women are not able to access the 3 points that I broke out, and God knows there are more than three. But if we can't, if women can't feel whole, if women aren't allowed to be their full selves, we can't sustain the planet. Any other questions?
Yes, we just got another. It says, how are businesses involved in this?
So many businesses involved in, let's, if I could get a little more clarification. So how are businesses involved in what exactly?
She clarified, how are businesses involved in the problems and solutions?
Oh, it would really depend upon the businesses. Most of this, a lot of this research is done by the United Nations, as you well know. It's done by the National Council on Domestic Violence. A lot of the organizations that do this work are funded by corporations with foundations. And I dare say that a lot of corporate dollars support the work that happens on this. So that's one of the ways that businesses can help to move the needle on this. And I think as businesses start to recognize how small the world is, and the need to really allow both women and men and transgender and bisexual people to participate fully, the better off we are. There's a great study that Citibank just put out talking about the loss of production, the loss of revenue, if you will, the loss of the loss of GDP by the United States through racial discrimination and the racial inequities that African Americans have experienced. And this to me is similar. When you don't fully access everyone, when everyone doesn't have access, you aren't pulling everybody into the workforce. But my experience is that many businesses do support a lot of these initiatives, particularly businesses that are thinking with a very global mindset. Are we good? Any more?
Yeah, this is Gina, I just sent a comment. For many years, I've been entranced with the work of Riane Eisler. And for all of you out there, I want to point out her phenomenal book called The Real Wealth of Nations, Creating a Caring Economics. The entire book focuses on what you're talking about, which is how much we lose by not educating girls and including women fully in the economy and not paying for caring work, etc. Riane Eisler's been the pioneer in that area. So I highly recommend this book. It's mind-blowing.
Thank you. There's a woman who used to, Ursula Burns is was the former CEO, an African-American woman born and raised in Lower Manhattan, actually. And she was the chair of Xerox for many years. And she used to give these very inspiring speeches, and people would invariably ask her about diversity. And she said, I've made it quite simple to my teams. Why in the world would you only talk to half a room? Why in the world would you only market to, half a room? it makes no sense. And you really start to appreciate social constructs when you start to break it down and peel the onion back a little bit. Thank you for that.
We're good in the chat. No more
Okay.
questions.
Thank you. So the struggle for gender equity. The United Nations recognizes 195 countries. And as of October 2020, which is when I wrote this, no nation has achieved gender equity. Over 62 million girls worldwide are not in school. Illiteracy impacts poverty, healthcare outcomes, and certainly the ability to thrive. Violence against women, girls, and transgender women continues to soar, particularly among the transgender community. Black transgender women are especially at risk. As of October, the 32 transgender women were killed in the United States and Puerto Rico. 8% of the women globally experience violence at the hand of the intimate partner, and only 40% seek help. 58% of women globally who are killed or murdered, it's at the hands of a family member. So oftentimes in many countries you see where it's not the partner, but it's a family member because it's an honor killing. Voting rights. Vatican City is the only place where women aren't allowed to vote because cardinals are the voting body in Vatican, and women aren't allowed to become cardinals or priests for that matter. And Saudi Arabia was the last country to grant women the right to vote. You know, it's interesting how, you know, the rights are granted, but it's accessing those rights. It's making certain that the ability to exercise your right to vote is available as well. You know, a law is a document on a piece of paper. The actual act of voting is quite different. Education, health, and violence. These are all linked. Improvement to education, improving the access to education for women and girls improves poverty. It improves their ability to earn a living. It improves their ability to live a better life for them and for their children. It improves their healthcare outcomes. When gender issues exist, when those constructs exist, women don't enjoy equity. Men don't enjoy equity when women don't have equity. It's hard to believe, but the box puts women in a box and it puts men in a box. And no one thrives when we are boxed in. I often wonder to myself what it might feel like when, you know, you're upset and the social norm says you can't cry because you're a man and you have to be strong. And you know, what we think of men and what we think of women and how these issues change ever so slowly. And you watch as those people who fight these things aren't always embraced. And, you know, then society catches up and, you know, we use the term that you want to be on the right side of history. So equity is critical to making certain that women, girls, transgender women are able to lead vibrant, healthy, violence-free lives. So I am going to take some additional questions. I have my references on the very last slide, so more questions?
So, can I ask you a question? What kind
Yes.
of policies would you subscribe? What would you advise people? You like you said, you consult a lot of different groups.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
just can't help be curious about who taps into your consulting services and what kind of prescriptions would you offer?
So most of my consulting services are focused here domestically. They're on diversity, equity, and inclusion. So many of my clients are schools working with their administrators and teachers, corporations, and they're really working on providing an inclusive environment. So I don't practice a lot in this gender equity space. It's kind of an additional passion of mine. But what I would subscribe to, and I think some of this could play out in other places. And I'm taking my time as I say this because, a lot of these issues are societal issues.
Mhm.
And it really it takes a lot of advocacy work. So I think that one of the things that needs to happen globally as well as the U.S. is I think that we have to advocate for women's rights. And I think the advocacy needs to include all women. I think for a very long time, um, the women's rights movement here in the US has spoken very singularly to white women. And I think women, I think Black women, I think Latinx women, I think Asian women have not necessarily felt like the conversation included them. So I think we need an incredibly inclusive conversation about advocacy. And I think they're just, if we go back to that index and think about all of the things that impact women and women's ability to access the world, if you will, to access their power. You could almost work in any one of those. You could work in healthcare and think about the need to advocate for women's health. And that is a huge problem, when you think about the African continent and the Indian continent.
Mhm.
Just in terms of the pandemic, I was looking at a news program last night where they were showing a refugee camp. And the people who have been the victims of COVID, their reported cases are very low because people are ostracized and shamed for COVID outbreaks. And then when you think about, the access to education, in some places, the children are needed to help with farming, fetching water, all of those things. So I think to answer your question, I would say that advocacy work is the most important thing all of us can do. I think that we all have to advocate for the rights of women and girls. We all have to care. We all have to make certain that in our own countries, that those rights are being pushed. That as we vote, as we're voting, we need to think about who's advocating for the rights of women, girls, and transgender people. So that's my very long answer.
Great. Yeah.
We have another question in the chat. It says, you may have mentioned it, but what about pay discrimination?
I didn't talk about pay. I could have been here for 14 days talking about pay discrimination. I think pay discrimination is certainly huge. I think it's New York where they're now starting to talk about, New York passed the law that you cannot ask for pay history. And one of the many things that you see happen, first of all, you know, women's experiences is, I'm going to make a blanket statement, so please forgive me. But I do believe there's research to back this up. Women's pay lags behind men's pay all the time, right? So, you know, we know that, you know, white women, I think it's 78%, and African American women, 66% for the same thing. I think in order for that to change, we have to examine what's going on in corporations, not-for-profits, wherever people work. I think we need to stop everywhere in the United States as well as around the world, asking women how much they earned before. I think we have to do something about child and elder care. You know, I referenced that McKinsey study. I think forward, you know, 5 years from now, when God willing, we're out of this pandemic and those women are ready to go back into the workplace. They've lost 5 years of experience, and that's going to ding them. So I think that, you know, we have to address childcare, and we have to address, we have to hold organizations accountable for how they pay women, um, and what the criterion is. And, you know, if you were to ask me, I think the criterion for what I should be paid is what I've done and what I bring to the table. It shouldn't be how much someone paid me before, because that just then perpetuates the inequity in pay.
So I don't want to play politics over here, but when you hear a president tell everybody that, you know, those suburban women, you know, I'm for you, your husbands will soon be back at work. What do you make of such a statement? Because I believe that is extremely offensive to women in general.
Well, I think it is incredibly offensive, and it presumes that all suburban women are stay-at-home moms. So it is offensive. You know, that I think people want to be healthy, and work is certainly part of your mental health, because when you can earn a living, everything works better. So it's incredibly offensive. And I also find it offensive the way they break down the categories of women. You know, you've got white women are broken down into multiple categories, and then you have black women, and we're just black women. You know, we don't get a category. Latinx women don't get a category. But you know, you got suburban moms and college educated moms, and it's just so much. And what that does is those little they dissect women. And certainly we're not a monolith, and certainly women are all very, very different. But until I think women understand the power that they have, and until we advocate for one another, and see our shared humanity, it's going to be a problem. So, you know, I guess after almost 4 years, we're all kind of used to those kinds of comments, and you know, it's kind of par for the course. But I find it incredibly offensive that, you know, someone would dare think that. I live in a suburban community, and I was married when I moved here, and many of the women around me worked, many didn't work. You know, it just depended upon the woman, and some of those women went back to work, you know, afterwards. And it's that, you know, when we talk about pay equity, one of the things that impacts that greatly is the time that women are not at work. You know, the time that women have to take off because they're having a child, or raising a child, or involved in elder care. There's so many things that women, because we are the caregivers, are off ramped for. And, you know, we are in some ways, the United States, we are ahead of some countries, but in some ways it should all be so much better, no matter where you are. Any more questions?
That was a great discussion because I wanted to get that off my chest.
Well,
So.
I want to get a lot off my chest, and I usually do it yelling it at the television.
Right.
Well, thank you all for attending my session. And I wish you great luck. And I hope that all of you that are eligible to vote have voted or are voting or have a plan to vote. I wish everybody safety, good health. And this is my public service announcement. Please wear a mask. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Gale. This was most interesting discussion.
You're welcome.
Yes, thank you so much. It was just so enlightening and I really, truly enjoyed it. Blessings to you because it was awesome. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you.